to have joy. Sometimes it's easier than others to remember those things. I think we'll kind of go through that in Judges 8, where there are easier and harder times just right there in Judges 8. That'll be my segue. I don't know if that was a good segue or not. Okay, if I say segue, do you guys think of the little rolly two-wheel thing? Hopefully not. Anybody ever gotten to ride one of those? I never have, but and I don't even think they're around much anymore. Anyway, well, we'll jump on into Judges 8. Looking forward to this. You can see the title right up at the top of the handout. No matter how right you are, would you agree, Judges 6, Judges 7, Gideon is pretty much right on, right? I don't think he really started as a mighty warrior. I think God could see what he could become. But last chapter, even cutting down, the grove and destroying the idol in Judges 6, and then Judges 7, he in 300, I think he displayed a lot of faith, won a great victory, was used by God, and he was pretty much right on. We're going to see him do a lot of things right, especially at the beginning of Judges 8, and not have an easy time because of it. And then we're going to see him, even though he started right, kind of drifting. So hopefully some helpful reminders for even when we're doing right, we need to keep going. Even when we're doing right, we need to take a look at making sure we're following God, not people's responses. So I thought, with the idea of things can still be difficult even when we're right on, I'd ask a couple of tricky questions, little brain teasery questions. My only request is if you've heard it before and you've memorized the answer, don't answer right away. So if you know the answer, just hold off. Let anybody that wants to try to figure it out. Some of these are classic. Probably have heard them before. But which word would you use if you needed to describe a person who doesn't have all their fingers on one hand? What word would you use to describe that person? What do you say, Brooklyn? Fingerless, okay? Any other thoughts? If you needed to describe a person who doesn't have all their fingers on one hand, here's the trick. I'd call them normal. I don't have all my fingers on one hand either. I've got some on the other hand. I tried to warn you that these aren't fair. We'll try to look at some good, normal, straightforward things in Judges 8. But, all right, the next one. If a plane crashes right on the border between Canada and the United States, where should they bury the survivors? You don't bury survivors. You have no idea how many people I've tricked on that one. I will say I've heard that one for years. All right. You have only one match, and you have a tough choice. You need to start a fire. It's freezing. You have a lantern, you have some wood, and you have a newspaper. What do you light first? The match. A lot of people think, hey, if I'm starting a fire, man, I'll light that newspaper, get it burning. And yeah, all right, just a couple more. A man went out in a downpour, just raining cats and dogs. That's not a trick, I promise. But just, oh, by the way, what do you get if it rains cats and dogs? Poodles. There you go. Anyway, but my dad would chip in some more. He's actually supporting grandsons tonight. They're in a program is where my folks are. But this guy goes out in the rain. I mean, just a downpour. He's not wearing a hat, and not a single hair on his head gets wet. How's that possible? He's bald. You've heard that one before, though. All right. Yes, you have. All right, last one. How can it be that every single person in a plane crash died, but 2 people survived? Nope, they were. That's a good thought. Well, how? Nope. No force field. Sorry, Brooklyn. No. How can it be that every single person in a plane crash died, but 2 people survived? Nope. They were married, yes. Every single person died. That one's extra tricky. That was actually from a video that has more. If you want more of those, you can look at them with me sometime. Well, really, no matter how right you are on some of these trick questions, there's always a way to make the wording where you'll be wrong. You probably found that before. Maybe that's how some of you felt about school. That no matter how much you knew the material, anybody else hate true-false questions? Multiple choice matching is way better. You like true false? Okay, good for you, Addison. But they get a lot of modified true false where you do not ever write false in the blank. If the underlined word makes it false, you have to fill in the blank with the right word. I know. It's modified. Anyway. But for us, if we're right with God, we need to stay right with God and let Him take care of the details. Maybe you'd agree that's easier said than done. Gideon nails it when there's a battle. He nails it when lives are on the line. And as soon as things are good, he really needs some reminders. So no matter how right we are, we need some different reminders. We need that right mindset. I love the Abraham Lincoln quote from his 1863 Thanksgiving proclamation. So we're just a little past Thanksgiving. Abe Lincoln said, "We have been the recipients of the choicest bounties of heaven." Haven't we gotten a lot from God? "We have been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity." That was about to change, but "we have grown in numbers, in wealth, and power as no other nation has grown. But we have forgotten God. And we have vainly imagined that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own." I think Israel fell into that trap quite often. Everything's good, it must be because of us, and it was all because of God's blessing, and they drift away from God. I think that sadly fits America in many ways today. May it not fit us. Sadly, I think it fits Gideon in many ways. As we get toward the end of his life, we'll see about it. So first of all, you can fill in a blank. No matter how right you are, a wise answer will still be necessary. No matter how right you are, a wise answer will still be necessary. Picking up in verse 1 of Judges 8. "And the men of Ephraim," so one of the tribes that was not a part of the 300, the men of Ephraim said unto Gideon, "Why hast thou served us thus, that thou callest us not when thou wentest to fight with the Midianites?" And they did chide with him sharply. They're thinking, hey, we're going to have a battle right now between us and you. And he said unto them, "What have I done now in comparison of you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer?" Again, referring to him. But so, hey, isn't the gleaning, the leftovers that you've gotten in the battle, actually even more than what I've gotten? I love the wisdom. You've done more than I have. Verse 3, "God hath delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. And what was I able to do in comparison of you?" Then their anger was abated toward him when he had said that. I love the humility. Don't you think? I mean, the battle's not even completely done. Don't you think the adrenaline's pumping pretty hard for Gideon right now? And if anyone could be tempted to pride, probably Gideon, right? He just got used by God in one of the most amazing ways ever. And yet he humbly and kindly responds. He gives that soft answer. So again, this tribe, the tribe of Ephraim, was not a part of the 300. It was men from other tribes. And one commentator I read really said, hey, that was probably good that arrogant, prideful Ephraim that was jostling for their position, that they weren't part of the thousands that got called, with a lot of them being sent home, because they probably wouldn't have been willing to go home. They would have bristled and said, no, we want the honor. And it was all about God getting the honor and glory. So I think we can see God's plan in that. But you may remember from last week, chapter 7, that after the 300, light their torches, shout, blow the trumpets, sword of the Lord and of Gideon, and the Midianites pretty much start destroying themselves, that others were able to, from the other tribes and everything, able to join in the battle. Well, Ephraim was, and it was some of the people from Ephraim that captured Oreb and Zeb, the princes of Midian. So Gideon really focuses there and says, you're a big part of the battle. He could have responded in anger. He could have responded in pride. But he gave that soft answer. I think it's a great reminder for us. It's Proverbs 15:1 that says, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Are our words helping the situation or hurting it? Are we stirring up anger? Are we provoking to wrath? One pastor said, those who fly into a rage are apt to make a poor landing. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I love Gideon's response here. So he is spot on. I know of nothing in his motives, nothing in his actions, nothing in his words that could be improved right now. And yet he's still getting trouble. Isn't that the way it goes sometimes? In fact, sometimes it's when we are spot on. Us and God, we're serving the Lord. Everything is just what it's supposed to be. That will be tested. In fact, if you as an individual, if us as a church, if we're doing something for God, the devil's not going to like it. And he's going to try to trip us up. Now, am I saying that Satan himself stirred up Ephraim? I'm not saying that. But at the same time, we can mark it down. When we are doing right, we'll often have to rely on God to stay right. We'll often have to, word by word, rely on God just as much as when we were in the thick of the battle. No matter how right we are, we're still going to have to give that wise answer. Thankfully, God's got that help, word by word, day by day. Well, next, as we get all the way into verse 4, no matter how right you are, you'll still struggle to put one foot in front of the other at times. No matter how right you are, you'll still struggle to put one foot in front of the other at times, just because you're human. I think I pronounced the H that time. My wife has helped me in so many ways. One of the ways she has helped me is apparently I don't pronounce H's at the beginning of words when it's an HU. So, human. So I'd say human. You're a human, you're a human, I'm a human. So now I've been trying to say human, and then I just overpronounce it. So I apparently can't talk. And I grew up in Chambersburg. That's not a Franklin County thing. I have no idea. That's not a my parents thing. I have no idea where it comes from. I don't know. Anyway, so it just cracks me up. But we're all people. We'll use the word people. You're a person, I'm a person. We're going to struggle to keep going sometimes, no matter how right we are. Let me read the verse, and I'll make a couple of points. Verse 4, and Gideon came to Jordan River there, and passed over, he and the 300 men that were with him, faint, yet pursuing them. I love that verse. The humanity of it. They were faint. They were about to faint. They were about exhausted, and yet they kept pursuing in God's strength. Gideon could have been tripped up by Ephraim. He could have been tripped up by how exhausted he and his army were, and yet he keeps going. One step at a time with God's power. No matter how right we are, there are going to be times we feel like giving up. You know, you're allowed to feel like giving up. You're a person. You're a human, however you want to say it. We're people. We're going to feel that sometimes. But we need to remind ourselves, no, we can keep going. But I do think we need to say the good old Davy Crockett phrase that I just love and I say often, be sure you're right, then go ahead. Sometimes God wants us to rest. God wants us to step back. God wants us to not put one foot in front of the other for a time. God wanted Gideon to keep going, and he kept going. And wouldn't you know it, God gave him the power. He was faint, yet pursuing, faint, yet able to keep going. Sometimes, I think God's telling us with everything he's got, hey, slow down a sec. Take that time. So let's take the moments when we're feeling exhausted, like we can't keep going, to make sure we should keep going. Maybe we should take a little time to step back. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, if it is time to keep going, maybe push through and then rest, okay? We're people. We're going to feel those different struggles. We can keep going, though. Next, no matter how right you are, you'll still encounter those who won't make the fight their fight. I think I have it worded the same way on your paper and mine. No matter how right you are, you'll still come across, you'll still encounter others who won't make the fight their fight. Really, even when it is their fight. Pick back up in verse 5. It says, and he, Gideon, said unto the men of Succoth, give, I pray you, loaves of bread unto the people that follow me, for they be faint. They're faint yet pursuing. Hey, give us some bread. And I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. So Oreb and Zeb, the princes, are captured. He's going after the kings. He's trying for a complete victory, as he should. And the princes of Succoth said, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hands, that we should give bread unto thine army? And Gideon said, therefore, when the Lord hath delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into mine hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. And he went up thence to Penuel, and spake unto them likewise. And the men of Penuel answered him, as the men of Succoth had answered him. And he spake unto the men of Penuel, saying, when I come again in peace, I will break down this tower. I'll be honest, that passage confused me for a little. He's going to do it. He's going to do exactly what he said he would do. And it confused me until it was a commentary or a sermon that I listened to just recently in preparation for this message. And they reminded me, really reminded anybody who would read or listen, those are Israelite cities. for whatever reason, I guess I had it in mind for a while, I don't know why, but that these were kind of Switzerland. They're the innocent bystanders that could choose to get involved or choose not to, and they're scared to get involved because what if Gideon loses? Then anybody that's helped Gideon might be in trouble. They should have joined the battle. These are Israelite cities that should have joined the battle. This fight was their fight. This fight is against Midian. They should have been like, you want loaves? How about bread and some soldiers? How about we help you in every way? I'm sorry we didn't get to the battle sooner. You got Ephraim saying, why didn't you call us? We wanted to fight sooner. And you got these people not even willing to give their fellow Israelites bread. Charles Spurgeon said, some have said that this showed resentment and harshness, but when a man is at war, he is not in the habit of sprinkling his adversaries with rose water. That's just kind of funny. War is in itself so great an evil that there are many other evils necessarily connected with it. It seems to me that if when Gideon was trying to deliver his own countrymen, they scoffed at him and refused him bread for his soldiers in the day of their hunger, they deserved to be punished with great severity. And I like how Spurgeon put it. Another commentator said, why didn't Gideon show the people of Succoth and Peniel the same kindness that he showed the Ephraimites and simply forgive their offenses? For one thing, their offenses were not alike. The pride of Ephraim was nothing compared to the rebellion of Succoth and Peniel. Ephraim was protecting their tribal pride, a sin, but not a costly one in the battle there, while Succoth and Peniel were rebelling against God's chosen leader and assisting the enemy at the same time. Leaders must have discernment or they will make wrong decisions as they deal with different situations. I like this, personal insults are one thing, but rebellion against the Lord and his people is quite something else. Can't you picture David about to charge into the battle against Goliath? I think Goliath could have insulted David's dog. I think he could have insulted David's sheep. Could have insulted his truck. No, they didn't have trucks back then. He could have insulted the food he brought. He probably could have insulted his brothers, and David might have liked that. I don't know. But he could have insulted his dad, whatever. But Goliath insulted God, and David wouldn't stand for it. Not at all. He charged into the battle and took care of it. And I love that. In many ways, that's what Gideon is doing here. Verse 10, now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their hosts with them, about 15,000 men, and all that were left of all the hosts of the children of the east, for there fell 120,000 men that drew sword. Verse 11, and Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents on the east side of Nobah and Jogbehah, and smote the host, for the host was secure. And when Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued after them, and took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and discomfited or whooped all the host. I love the fact that Gideon was not content to just win a little bit of the battle. And really, he moved into battle, still outnumbered, no doubt, but with confidence, because what God had already done encouraged Gideon for what God would do. That's why I think it's so important to share praises, not just prayer requests. Share them with God. If you share them public, that's fine. But just to take the time to notice what God has done. Hey, last week, God do something for you? Guarantee it. If we'll take the time to notice, I think that'll give us courage for next week. God ever brought you through something like what you're going through right now? Good or bad? Yeah, that can give us confidence for what he will do. Well, let's keep reading the story here. Verse 13, and Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle before the sun was up, and caught a young man of the men of Succoth, and inquired of him. And he described unto him the princes of Succoth, and the elders thereof, even 70 men. And he came unto the men of Succoth, and said, behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, with whom ye did upbraid me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hand, that we should give bread unto thy men that are weary? And he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. I hope they learned their lesson. Verse 17, and he beat down the tower of Penuel, and slew the men of the city. Then said he unto Zebah and Zalmunna, what manner of men were they whom ye slew at Tabor? And they answered, so these are the Midianite kings there, and they answered, as thou art, so were they. Each one resembled the children of a king. And he said, they were my brethren, even the sons of my mother. As the Lord liveth, if ye had saved them alive, I would not slay you. So now he's back to dealing with the enemy here, verse 20. And he said unto Jether, his firstborn, up and slay them, But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared, because he was yet a youth. Understandable. Verse 21, then Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise thou, and fall upon us. For as the man is, so is his strength. I think, goading and teasing Gideon. And Gideon arose and slew Zebah and Zalmunna, and took away the ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Again, he executed them. That can sound harsh, but really, according to Mosaic law, that the Midianite kings weren't under Mosaic law. They didn't submit to it, but Gideon did. According to Mosaic law, the family was to avenge crimes. I don't think that Gideon's brethren died necessarily on the battlefield. Now, if they did, still understandable, but I imagine there's more to that story where they were probably murdered, in all honesty. So we don't know all of the details, but I think Gideon was definitely within his rights on that part. Then we look at, I believe, our last point. Spend several verses on this. No matter how right you are, some things are easier said than done. And really, it's no matter how right you are at the start. Some things are easier said than done. Easier said than done is your blank there. And we'll take a look at those verses. I would say up to this point, Gideon has done a great job. Now, we could probably debate, was he a little extra harsh with those, Succoth and Peniel, those cities? And I really don't know. Did he have to execute those two? Seems like it, but we could probably go around on some different things on there. But in general, he is following God courageously and boldly and doing so well. And all he has to do is keep going. And he's going to say the right things. But in oh so many ways, he's not going to do them. Easier said than done. Let's pick back up in verse 22. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, rule thou over us, both thou and thy son's son also. So in other words, hey, you be king, and you be the kingly line. Did Israel right now need a king? No, they had one. His name's God. God was their ruler. And if they would each individually follow God, each tribe follow God, they're going to be blessed. They're going to be in the promised land. They won't need a king. Can you imagine a society so blessed they don't need human government? Doesn't that sound like a good thing? Again, they don't need a king, but they want a king. And they're saying, hey, your sons, we'll submit to that. For thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you, and the Lord shall rule over you. 100% perfect answer. And then he's going to fail several tests. He says he doesn't want to be a king, but then he wants to live like a king. Unfortunately, he wants all of the trappings, even some of them sinful, that a king would often have the right to claim. And then he's going to name a son who we'll spend next chapter, probably several weeks, probably in January, spend a little time on in January. He's going to name his son a name that basically means my dad is king. Says he doesn't want to be king, but a little later he's got a son, and he names him my dad was king. Yeah. So first of all, and this isn't in your notes, but I have this kind of divided into a few points. First of all, the test of truly worshiping God, not an object. Test of truly worshiping God, not an object. Verse 24. And Gideon said unto them, I would desire a request of you. Hey, I don't want to be king, but give me this here, that you would give me every man the earrings of his prey. For they had golden earrings, because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, we will willingly give them. And they spread a garment, did cast therein every man the earring of his prey. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,000 and 1,700 shekels of gold, besides ornaments and collars and purple raiment that was on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that were about the camels' necks. To say that was a king's ransom might be an understatement. To say only a king would deserve such wealth would probably be accurate. Even a king probably wouldn't. Anyway, verse 27. And Gideon made an ephod thereof, and put it in his city, even in Ophrah. And all Israel went thither, whoring after. They are being adulterous in worshiping that object instead of God. I don't know that Gideon ever worshiped the ephod. That was a piece of the clothing that the high priest would wear, that it would go on the chest, and it would contain the Urim and Thummim, that can help make decisions as they cast lots. There was supposed to be one, and there was one with the tabernacle. Gideon had no right to make it. So now he wants the money, he wants the even spiritual authority to be a priest, so to speak, and wouldn't you know it, that leads Israel down a dark path. It says, which thing became a snare unto Gideon and to his house. Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more. And the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon. Back to Charles Spurgeon. I love some good Charles Spurgeon quotes. He said about Gideon, he did not set up an idol, but he made an ephod, an imitation of that wonderful vestment, clothing, worn by the high priest. Perhaps he made it of solid gold, not to be worn, but to be looked at, simply to remind the people of the worship of God, and not to be itself worshipped. But dear friends, you see here that if we go half an inch beyond what God's word warrants, we will always get into mischief. He had done so much right, but no matter how right you are, some things are easier said than done. He needed to put it into application to not just not sin, but to avoid temptation. Can you imagine going from whatever wealth he had, whatever money he had, to having all of that money? I think he's exhibiting a love of money. It's interesting, some of those ornaments were apparently in a half moon style. I always picture the crescent moon style. I always picture South Carolina's flag. If you've ever seen they have a palm tree and a little crescent moon. When we lived in South Carolina, we'd see it all over the place. But this one was actually a symbol of a false god worshipped by some of the Amalekites or Midianites. You know what that false moon god's name was? Allah. Yeah, Islam didn't begin when people will claim it began, by the way. There is history there, and it ain't good. He was a tribal god. It never existed. But, yeah, the origins of Islam go back farther than a Muslim would tell you if you study it out. It was one tribal false god. And now you got one guy claiming to have gotten visions, Muhammad, obviously. And all of a sudden, it's this big thing. Keep people scared to death, and you can make them follow it. It's really a sad trap of a religion. It really, really is. But anyway, that doesn't really have much to do with Gideon. Just a little interesting nugget in there to take a look at. This is a sad commentary, but I'm going to read it. Gideon was remarkably obedient and filled with faith in the extreme moment of battle. I mean, wasn't he? The routine of daily living seems to have been a greater test of his character. I think that's true for us as well, quite often. Maybe in the middle of a very big difficulty, then we're okay. We rely on God, but then we try to rely on ourselves there. Next, we see Gideon facing the test of wrong desires. Verse 29, and Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, that's Gideon, went and dwelt in his own house, and Gideon had 70 sons of his body, so 70 sons begotten, for he had many wives. And his concubine, that was in Shechem, she also bare him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. So he's kind of pulling a Solomon on a smaller scale, not 700, but all of these different wives and concubines disobeying God's plan. And wouldn't you know it, he names his son, my father, a king. Abimelech means my father, a king. I think he fails the test of wrong desires. And then he faces the test of investing in the future. Now, I'm going to make an application. I think Gideon could have done better in this area. We could debate that, but the application for all of us is right there. That we should, not just while we're around, have influence, but we should instill into the people in our lives something that outlasts us. Verse 32, and Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age, and was buried in the sepulchre of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Verse 33, and it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Balaam, and made Baal-berith their god. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of all their enemies on every side. Neither showed they kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, namely Gideon, according to all the goodness which he had showed unto Israel. So Israel blows it big time. Would you agree? But I do think, this is more opinion than anything, and I want to be clear about that. I do think Gideon failed, maybe in his later years, to instill things into the people the way he could have. Really, if our influence stops the moment we're not there to stare at people, not very good. Girls, you got to be an example. Nothing bad about you, and you get to stay seated. But seriously, my children, if they only would do right while mommy or daddy are staring at them, are we really training them? No. I love catching my girls doing right. And I often do. I try to tell them about it. But I love when they don't have to and they choose to. That's really my job and Jen's job. That's really our job as parents, is to instill those things that will outlast us. I think it's great if we all show up looking, spiffed up for Sunday and, looking like good Christian folks, whatever that even, I don't even know what that phrase means, but looking like good Christian folks at church. I mean, I don't take that for granted. That matters. But I think the test of the spiritual strength of our church isn't necessarily Sunday morning as much as Tuesday afternoon or Thursday evening. I'm just picking a time. But I think that's the test of the strength of our church. So I know there are many influences in our church, as there should be. But if I, as the pastor, if I can influence, people to behave well, to follow God from this hour to that hour, while we're here in the building, and that's it, I'm an absolute failure as a pastor. I hope we'll have our influence that goes beyond. You can't laugh right then. You're going to imply that I am a failure. You're good. I just thought that was funny. Anyway, I can't ignore stuff. I have to comment about it. It's just me. It's not a good thing, but it's fun. Y'all are fine. No, but at the same time, we should be instilling something. And sometimes that's a parent to a child, a pastor to a church, but coworkers and on that we can influence. I hope we'll always do our part to influence. Now, what we read is not Gideon didn't influence. It's that they immediately followed Baal after he died. So maybe he's doing all he can to stem the tide. But again, building the ephod, disobeying God's commands, it doesn't look like it. But either way, Israel is responsible for the decisions they made. And to just use a good old, country expression, they're going to get their comeuppance. We'll read about that in the next chapter. I wish they would have avoided it. Comeuppance, is that an old man expression? Yeah, a little bit. Okay. Anyway, and I got to pause on Judges until after Christmas. But I appreciate the reminders from Gideon that if we'll follow God, He'll take care of the details. He'll let us win battles. But it takes daily effort. There are going to be times we feel like we can't take another step. We're going to be faint, yet hopefully still pursuing, following God. There are going to be times we're going to be tested. But we can, with God's help, always pass those tests. Hey, let's pray, and we'll go on with our service from there. God, thank you for your goodness. I pray for your blessing on the remainder of our evening as we share some prayer requests and things. I pray that we'll be able to even share some praises, but that we'll lift you up during the week, and that we'll just be able to be there for each other this week. Maybe even sharing some things on our hearts right now that we can be praying for each other all week long. Pray that you'll bless it. May we follow Gideon's example in many ways and learn from it where he could have done better. May we learn from you and from your word ultimately. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.